Champions Cup semi-final weekend is upon us. We're getting down to that part of the season. So I'm going to look ahead to both matches in this video. Apologies for those of you that are regular watchers of the channel. It's been quite inconsistent in uploading recently. If you did watch my video from Twickenham after Harlequins Northampton, you would have seen me coughing and spluttering away. The voice hasn't exactly been holding up to it recently, so that's part of the reason. But we're back, and looking ahead to this weekend, I'm really interested in this weekend. Is it going to be two really one-sided semi-finals, or is there an upset in there? Can Northampton and Harlequins make it tighter than many people expect? We shall wait and see, but have your say in the comment section. Let me know. Do you think it's going to be two routine wins for Leinster and Toulouse? That's probably how we see it on paper, but Northampton playing very well this year. Harlequins have already done it against Bordeaux. Do you think either of them can produce what would be a historic upset and one of the great upsets in the history of the Champions Cup? So welcome back to the channel. As I say, comment section is where you can let me know. Make sure you like the video. And if you haven't already, then just hit subscribe on the channel. Makes a massive, massive difference, and I'd really appreciate it if you feel so obliged. So team news will come out later on this week, most likely tomorrow. Starting off though with Leinster and Northampton. At Croke Park, sold out in a matter of hours. 82,000 is it in the house? What an occasion it is going to be. Straight off the bat, I'll say I don't have an issue with the location of this match. I know there's been quite a lot of discussion for both of these teams. The idea is you get home country advantage, but not home city, whereas this game is taking place in Dublin, and Toulouse likewise are happening very, very close to them. I overall don't have a problem with it, because I think if you make yourself the number one and number two seeds, if you make yourself a high enough seed that you get this advantage, then you should be able to enjoy it. And I get it in terms of it should be a more neutral venue, but I think in Ireland, there aren't any other venues outside of the Aviva, which would be counted as a home stadium, I think, or Croke Park. Where else could they host it? It makes more sense to host it in one of the biggest stadiums that they're then able to sell out. Toulouse, I guess there's more of an argument. There's more places in France that you could use, bigger stadiums. Marseille might be great. But as I said, overall, I don't have a huge issue with it and all that discussion point. But Leinster-Northampton, when I look at this game, part of the really interesting element of it is the psychological aspect. Leinster haven't won the Champions Cup for a little while now by their high standards, and given the fact that they're always at the business end of the competition, losing in two really tight finals to La Rochelle, losing in semi-finals and quarter-finals, and just not quite getting themselves over the line. And then when you also throw in the fact that they haven't won the URC in the last few years, how relevant is that, I suppose, is my question to you. How relevant is the fact that whilst there are still players in this Leinster team who have won a lot at club and international level, there are some players in this team that, for Leinster at least, haven't ever been able to get over the line in the very biggest games. How relevant is that for this match? We'll wait and see. What I would say is I think Leinster this year, we're starting to already see the Jacques Nienaber effect, in the sense that their defence is better. I think they look more robust in defence, and I think they have a different physical edge with the likes of Joe McCarthy, who's coming of age, been brilliant this year for Leinster and for Ireland, with various different options in that team as well. They feel like they're a bit more of a hardened side that don't just rely on that really slick attacking play that we've seen them produce previously. So I think because of those two things, I just feel like they're in a better place to be able to go and do it this year, certainly win this weekend, and then be able to, presuming they face Toulouse, challenge them in the final. It feels like a Leinster team that are better set up to go and do it. But as I say, that psychological aspect, how big an issue is it? The final thing I'll say for Leinster as well is the way in which they're able to prepare for these games. It's absolutely brilliant for them. I'm not knocking it. It's just a reality of where we are. Rotating their team in the URC, even their senior coaches flying back from South Africa early, and the academy coaches taking the game most recently at the weekend. All of their preparation and focus can go on to this game. In theory, they should be in a great position for it because of those things, because of the way in which they're able to prepare. And from a Northampton point of view, to get on to Saints, They have rotated as well in the last few rounds of the Premiership, but not to the same degree. They don't have the squad depth, and they don't, I think, have the same luxury as Leinster in terms of being able to rotate in that way. So how do Northampton win? Well, I feel like the reality is they need... Northampton this year, first of all, they look a lot more battle-hardened. They still have the same attack of Northampton sides of previous years, but they also have a team that are able to go away to Saracens and win in the Premiership, that can back their defence. A lot has been made of how their defence and their set piece is better. So that's a positive sign. But I think that attack has to be absolutely fizzing, and they have to keep the game tight. There will be swings in momentum. Can they keep it tight so that that psychological aspect for those Leinster players starts to become a factor? Overall, Leinster understandably will be heavy favourites, but I'm really intrigued to see how Northampton front up, because for the most part this year, a lot of the questions that we have asked of them, of previous Northampton teams being a little bit soft, not being able to get the tough away victories in the Premiership, they've answered a lot of those questions. In the same way to how they went away to Munster and how brilliant they were against Munster in that game when they lost a player to a red card, to still able to go to Thomond Park and win the game. They have answered these questions. This weekend is as big a question as they will face. Are they able to get the job done? And a part of that as well is Finn Smith. How intriguing to see him, who was brilliant in that Munster game, once again be tasked as a young fly half to marshal the team in a huge game. Excuse me. So that's Leinster Northampton. Overall, as I say, Leinster heavy favourites. On to Toulouse and Harlequins. Can Harlequins do it again? So they've already gone away to Bordeaux and were written off before that game. No one expected them to do it, and produced one of the great away performances for an English club in this competition. It was a ridiculous game, sensational match. Can they do it again? I was trying to think, how was it that they beat Bordeaux? Because I feel like if they are to beat Toulouse, they're going to need a lot of the same elements. Now, I think there's a few different things. First of all, they started really well in that game. Excuse me. They started really well against Bordeaux. They fronted up physically and they absorbed the pressure when it came. And I look at all those elements and they're as relevant for this game as they were for that game, in that they have to be able to start well. You can't allow Toulouse to build up a score on you early on in the game. The way they fronted up physically against Bordeaux was perhaps the most surprising element from an external point of view. We know Harlequins have the ability to score points and score them quickly. I don't think that many of us, or any of us really, knew that they could go up against that Bordeaux pack and win, 5 scrum penalties. Beat them at the breakdown. Beat them up at times physically. And they absolutely need to do that again against Toulouse. And it gets even tougher because you'd say Toulouse are an even better side than Bordeaux. And then the other thing I mentioned there, absorb the pressure when it came on. What I mean by that is there were multiple times in that game against Bordeaux where the French side scored a try or scored a couple of tries or really cut the deficit or gave themselves the lead. And it was that period in the game where you felt, okay, this is where they now pull away and they end up winning quite comfortably, which is actually what we saw in the quarterfinal between Toulouse and Exeter. For a half or so, or just over a half, really tight game, but ultimately Toulouse were able to show their class and pull away from them. That's what a lot of people would have expected to see in that Bordeaux game against Quins, but it didn't happen. Every time they got punched in the mouth, Harlequins had a counter-punch. Again, I think that is something that is pivotal for them this coming weekend. It's going to be a huge challenge. I mean, Toulouse, like Leinster, comfortably going to be the favourites for the game, but it is Quins. And they just have a habit and a belief in that team that they can get it done in these sorts of games. And I think that's a really powerful element. And that's, for me, the psychological element of this game. I talk about the psychological element in the Leinster game of those Leinster players not having won and that being a bit of a burden. I think for Quins, the psychological part is if they can keep it close, they know they can stick in these games. They know they can produce remarkable victories and remarkable performances because they have done it previously. It's two fascinating games. it's really possible as well that on Sunday evening, I'm sat here chatting about the fact that they were both really one-sided and it was a bit disappointing, and hopefully the final lives up to the billing. I think that is very possible as well. And the history of this competition shows that winning away from home in a semi-final is ridiculously tough. I think La Rochelle were the last to do it, but it doesn't happen that often. It certainly hasn't happened that often over the last few years. So if Quins or Northampton can do it, it would be monumental. Are they going to do it? You can let me know in the comments section, and let me expand on the game as well. I only ever mention a few different elements in these videos. There are loads more areas we can go into, but I think me chatting for 40 minutes at you isn't going to be particularly interesting. So you put it in the comments section, like the video, subscribe to the channel as well. I'll see you in the next one.